Okay, well, it's now 9:04. I think we should get started, Stuart. What do you think?
Think so? Let's do it.
All right. Good morning, everybody. My name is Erin Rocchio. I'm an executive coach with Evolution. I work with executive teams, organizations around building sustainable leadership and sustainable healthy culture. Really thrilled to have some incredible panelists with us today to introduce my new self-guided coaching program, Wholeness at Work, Free Yourself from Burnout for Good. And yay, thanks, Carrie. Woohoo. My little Vanna Whites, thank you. We're talking about burnout in 2020, how we can make 2021 better as a collective and for us as individuals. Before we get started, we're going to really dive into some important, rich conversation. I want to just tee up a couple of things for everyone, and then I'll introduce the panelists. For me, when we talk about burnout, we've got a lot of research around burnout in the workplace. It means chronic or prolonged stress, which I think, certainly have felt in 2020, this never-ending sense of anxiety and fear and stress in various ways, which we'll get into. We know that burnout looks like emotional exhaustion, cynicism, and reduced effectiveness just at work. That's before a pandemic. We knew in 2019, up to 80% of folks had experienced burnout at some point in their work life. Some of us experience it frequently or in cycles. And understanding those cycles and patterns and habits are a big part of the Wholeness at Work journey. So we can break free from that for ourselves and in our leadership. I want to also share that part of the perspective we're bringing today is from integral theory, which says that we're looking at burnout and well-being at three different levels: the individual, or I; we, or relational or cultural; and then it. We're looking at systems and structures that keep burnout or ill health in place. And so that's an important framework for everybody to understand. And then we're also going to be looking at a couple of distinctions. We're going to be talking about what burnout is and has looked like for us as all the panelists. We're going to take some questions from folks. And we're also going to talk about what wholeness means. You're going to hear us use wholeness, well-being, certain kind of aspired states or aspirational states. And I want to just let you know how I think about wholeness. Okay, it's a little bit different from just being engaged in your work, where you're giving back energy to your work or company. Wholeness is about having renewed ways of finding energy and enthusiasm. It's about flourishing. It's about self-mastery and learning, right? The evolution of self, deepening of self-awareness. And then really importantly, I think this is super powerful for all of us who have just survived 2020, right? Is that there's a huge degree of self-compassion that I want folks to leave here with, and that I want us to all hold for ourselves. This being human is not easy, right? And wholeness at work implies that we include all of our experience and all of ourselves in a lifelong process. So this is not, quick fix. If you came here for quick fixes, I'm afraid to tell you, we might have a few tips and tricks, but this is about a longer conversation and a deeper conversation about sustained leadership, sustained performance. For anybody that is trying to lead themselves, lead their family, lead your community, lead your business, right? Lead whole systems in a way that is human and inclusive, right? And can bring about ongoing well-being. So I wanted to get those out of the way. I also want to give you some intentions that I'm holding for our time today, which is that, I've gathered here some people that I respect and admire and care about greatly, that I think are brilliant, and they're going to have some answers because they're experts, and that's great. And I'm sure that's what you came for. But I also hope that you leave here with some questions. Like, I want this to spark curiosity. Like, how could I bring more XYZ into my daily experience or for others? I also hope you leave with a sense of empathy and compassion for yourself and for other people around you. and that you feel connected, right? So we're going to have a kind of casual coffee style conversation today. And I hope that you feel connected to the folks that I am going to be introducing here to you shortly, and to yourself more deeply. Okay. So let me introduce our panelists very quickly. So co-host is my good friend, Stuart McCullough, Managing Director at Evolution. Stuart, you want to say hi?
Hello, everyone. Great to be here.
Stuart is an executive coach, an agile expert, organization development expert, also brings a ton of experience in peer counseling, in kind of deep social change work and what that requires. So I'm really honored to have him here. Background in tech. He's calling from Berkeley, out in California.
That's right.
Stuart, I'm going to go through everybody and then I'll let you speak if that's okay and turn it over to you.
Perfect.
Okay, we also have Rachel Arkle. Rachel is my dear friend from London. Rachel is the founder of Yoke Consultancy and what I consider to be a pioneer or innovator in the space of organizational well-being. She is featured in Wholeness at Work in our program, especially towards the end when we talk about how do you build in well-being and health and sustainability into your leadership and into cultures. Rachel has a brilliant framework around that, so we're going to talk about that today. She's also a new mom, and so can relate to some of the parental fatigue and burnout I think that many of us have felt in 2020. And she's also an author of the Wellbeing Narrative, so go check that out. Next we have Carrie Sawyer, who's my fellow San Diegan and friend, who is the founder of the Inclusion First Project and CEO of Diversity by Design. Some of you may know Carrie if you follow any of our LinkedIns. Carrie is recently did a podcast called Anti-Racism for Allies. And I was privileged enough to join her for that. She brings a big, rich expertise around diversity and inclusion in the workplace.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here. And then we have Nathan Chappell. Nathan and I have known each other probably the longest out of this whole group. And Nathan is a former client, a friend, an incredible organizational leader, senior executive for a philanthropic organization that also uses AI to understand the science of giving. And I hope he'll talk to us more about what that actually means and what you're seeing, Nathan, today. Nathan is also a TEDx speaker, so you can check him out. It's called AI and the Future of Generosity. And so that's really exciting. We're thrilled to have all of you guys here. And just very briefly, my name is Erin Rocchio again, and I'm a partner, an executive coach at Evolution. As I said early on, I've written this book. It's actually a coaching program in the form of a book. I often say called Wholeness at Work. I'm very passionate about understanding not just peak performance, but peak performance from a sustained long-term kind of career-long perspective. So how do you live a good life and make an impact is the bottom line. That's what we're going to be talking about today, amongst other things. So we will have time for a Q&A. We do have 2 giveaways. One will be a free Wholeness at Work workbook, i.e. this. And we're also giving away in a few minutes a Maslow burnout inventory, which is a really brilliant kind of formalized assessment and kind of in-depth 40-page report about how you might be feeling, what might be contributing to your particular burnout situation. Okay, so more to come. With that, Stuart, I'd love to kind of turn it over to you and see if there's anything you want to say to tee us up today.
Yeah, I mean, thank you so much. This is such a powerful topic for people to explore. And, 2020 has been a year that everybody would like to give back if they could. And 2021 is now a year that we're looking to really take those lessons and move into a space of more connection, more wholeness, more sweetness, more kindness. And I'm excited to sort of listen to all of you and let's explore that. And I guess the first thing that I'd want to ask, the panelists, and maybe go one at a time, is, what do you see for 2021 for wholeness? What does that even mean? for you?
I can give some thoughts on that. So for me, 2021 and wholeness is really about redefining, like, what does wholeness mean? And redefining outside of the constraints of what it's previously meant. Like, what does success mean? What does, wellness mean? What are all of these things, and how does it actually apply to me? How can I scrap those models? Like, the 9 to 5, I hate it. I don't want to do it ever again, right? So, and I'm lucky because I'm an entrepreneur. So how do I redefine what that even looks like? What does work look like for me? What time do I work? How much do I work? How do I get rid of the shoulda, coulda, wouldas of the outside world and really just focus in on what makes me thrive and what makes my family thrive? And, obviously I have bills to pay too. So this is all part of it, but can I be enough and creative enough to create a different mix?
I love that, Carrie. There's something about redesigning work in general for all of us. Like we all get that opportunity, I feel like, or it's been necessitated that we be really thoughtful about how we do our work, right? Because it didn't work before for many of us, and now we're being forced to work in any way, if we're lucky enough to have a job, right? And I want to just say, I just realized, one of the things I meant to say at the start of this was like, we're lucky we're here having this conversation. There are a lot of folks who have not made it through 2020, and I just want to acknowledge that and honor the grief that I think many of us here in this conversation are probably holding around that. So thank you.
Yeah, I'm happy to chime in. 2020 was such an interesting year, and of course, such a difficult year, as you said, Erin, for so many people. Personally, I think I had given up on this idea of work-life balance. That adage prior to 2020. It was kind of like, people talk about it. It's hard to get traction, hard to get others to believe and follow it. 2020 forced me personally into a new path where the self-compassion wasn't equated to selfishness. And, for most of my career, I poured into others, but I didn't take care of myself. 2020 forced me to really look much deeper inward than I had in the past and figure out where my drivers of inspiration were coming from and the value that I place on learning and things like that. So I created new ways of working. And I really hope for myself, but for a lot of people, that through that journey, that 2021 will be that impetus to really care for themselves more than they had before, that they can be believers in, because they've been forced to create boundaries in different ways or reinvent themselves in different ways. That it's just the launching point. I mean, I think it's a great reset. But for me, the shackles of the way it had been have been removed. And I'm looking forward to riding that out and to continuing on that journey and to see where that goes.
Thanks, Nathan.
Yeah.
Can I maybe add a little bit something, Stuart, as a conservative Brit? I think for me, I sort of sometimes visualize well-being or resilience as if I've got all these levers. And often I run up to one of these levers and go, right, I'm going to think about my mental health right now. And I'm going to have a little play if I can build or maybe accidentally deplete that lever. But I don't really think about the other levers at that time. And I think what COVID has just been is this awesome experiment where we've been forced to really think, God, when I pull that, it affects that. And when this over here goes down, this bit goes up. So it feels like a genuine, when I love your word, Erin, whole. We're probably a bit too scared to use that as much as we could and step into that language in the UK, but it's this genuine appreciation that everything is connected and interrelated. And even academically now, we're still thinking that this is a one discipline over here, and then we measure it over here in a completely different hat. But how do we hug the concept of our life, our work in its broadest sense, and think about all of the different connections between that? So I was also, as I was hearing you, Stuart, I'm actually a little bit scared this year. So my sense is we're in full lockdown in London. and I feel like I'm on a mini protected yoga retreat. And I am protecting my morning meditation practice, yoga, my daughter's at nursery. And I just sort of, well, what happens when real life gets in now? So maybe my kind of recalibration process also has some fear in it, because this bubble has been a really beautiful place to reflect as well.
Mm-hmm. I relate to that a lot, Rachel. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you. Thank you. You know, and then the thing that arises is, you know, how are we, as you said, there were levers, but how do we notice what levers we need to pull? What things do we need to look at in order to be ready to even recontract around what is, you know, wholeness at work? And I'm curious a little bit about that. What are you all seeing? Like, what are the things that we should pay attention to?
Shall I dive in, as it was my concept that as other people familiarize themselves with what on earth I was talking about?
Please.
Yeah.
I guess if you look globally, in the UK, it is a slightly different context, because as an employee, we are contractually protected around talking about mental health. So I appreciate that's maybe slightly different in the US.
Mm-hmm.
But what I have noticed is that we tended to, pre-COVID times, talk about mental health as a bucket of emotional health, mental health, psychological health. We didn't really know what it meant. But I think this year we've become far more rehearsed at talking about our emotional health and how that infers to our mental health in particular. And the emotional stuff, I mean, I think I'm quite rehearsed at beginning to understand my emotions. I can definitely have a time lag as to how I then articulate that to myself, let alone anybody else. But the volume of change this year has made it hard for even me to figure out how I'm feeling. So I think the biggest one that I would personally pay attention to is the emotional lever.
Mm-hmm. Rachel, that really sparks something for me, you know, this idea about volume, right? I think all of us probably here are sufficiently resilient at handling adversity in some form or fashion, but my felt sense is just the sheer volume of things that we've had to handle and carry, right? It's like, I was talking to someone yesterday, and it was like, he was saying how, you know, the awareness that we hold has been pulled to the systemic level. And a lot of us aren't used to paying attention and being that tuned in to forces that are happening globally. And I think sometimes it's a really healthy thing. And other times it can really be stressful, because in my experience, like, one of the things I have felt in 2020 and seen with other people is this sense of lack of control. Like we know that things are breaking down around us, right? There's political instability, there's social unrest, there's injustice everywhere. Obviously, we're worried about our life and death, you know, our very well-being in most basic sense. And if you're a caregiver or healthcare provider through this pandemic, you see it acutely. But it's like the sheer volume. We can't turn it off. We can't ignore it. Most of us are on Twitter all day long, you know, guilty. And it's overwhelming. And so that's been a thing that I've seen when I think about like a symptom of burnout for me, has just been sheer overwhelm. And then the emotional roller coaster, like you're talking about emotional health. Suddenly my emotions are getting impacted by everything, not just what's, you know, going on in my day-to-day life with my two little girls. Like everything is now affecting me. And that's been an adjustment, something I've had to work through a lot, right? As well as support other people through. I'm curious kind of what you guys are seeing around symptoms of burnout in your life or with your clients.
Yeah, I resonate with that so much. I mean, there was a point in 2020, and I tend to have a lot of tolerance for change. It doesn't affect me as much as a lot of people, but there was a point where the cup was overflowing. And, you know, it takes a different level of self-reflection to determine, like, well, how are you acting different in this situation? And I honestly, it's so embarrassing, but I realized I had one shoe that was untied for like 2 weeks. And it was almost a point, and I'm a pretty OCD person, so this would not be my characteristic at all. But it was this reflection of like, it was almost like why does it matter? Like, why does it matter? I'm just going to leave my shoe untied for 2 weeks. It was crazy. But for me, that when I realized what that meant for me, it meant for me that I basically had like given up. Like, it was just like, screw it. I'm done. Like,
Resignation.
it's just too much. And that was a pretty big tipping point, because when we realize that we control freaks have a hard time with this, but we realize we're not in control, and we let go of all of that notion that we ever were in control, and we start to trust the journey and the path that is before us, then you can start to heal, and you can start to, really identify with like, well, what's my role? What can I control today that will make a difference in my life or someone else's life? And I had a couple of those moments this last year that were just like aha moments of like, wow, this really manifests itself in a different way. And for everyone, it's different. For me, it was just little things like that I had to really come to grips with and be like, okay, enough's enough. Like, we're turning the corner on this and, writing it out.
I love that visual. I'm curious, Carrie, Rachel, Stuart, how is this showing up in your work? I mean, how has this affected how you do your work? Like, are you resigned like Nathan, like, ugh, I can't control anything? Or have you, like myself, gone deeper into work, where work is my refuge, and now I'm overworking and not resting enough? Like, what have you been doing or noticing?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting kind of like flow, but not necessarily always in a good way, right? For me, I work in anti-racism, I work in diversity, equity, inclusion, and this has been one of the most insane times that I have been a part of, right? And so it's constantly coming at you. And the idea of burnout in the space of social justice to me sounds crazy. You can't burn out because that's a position of privilege. Like this, you have to continue the fight, continue the work all the time. And so you've got that narrative running in your mind. At the same time, I'm a person and, I'm reading the books and I'm listening to the podcast and I'm on the shows and all of these things. And I'm just like, I can't listen to this right now because I'm getting angry, I'm getting sad, I'm feeling all of these things that then impact my ability to, be with my partner, be with my family, do the work right, do the work right. That's a whole other topic, right? So what do you do? How do you protect yourself while also staying engaged without feeling like guilt or privilege or these different things? And for me, that's manifested in, hear my partner be like, talk to me in the morning, and he's like, all you talk about is race right now. And I'm like, no, I don't. And if I do, that's all right, because it's everywhere. It's all the time. Versus, you know what? I need to go watch cartoons right now. And that's one of my like self-care things. I'm like, Disney Plus, what do we got? I need some Marvel. I need some Moana. And then just noticing that I'm taking that space and seeing, okay, maybe I don't need to have, Dr. Kendi on replay 24/7. Maybe I need to like have some more balance, right? So, but you have to be aware. You have to notice, and it takes a while for you to notice that you're starting to go a little nuts.
I'm going to say, I love that idea of what are the tools that we're going to use, and not the tools necessarily that people are like, oh, this is certainly meditation and journaling. Those are the things that are super important and will help you create a more space for yourself. But watching cartoons, yes, please. Like, I'm totally down for that, right? What are the things that feed you both in all dimensions? But, as we were talking earlier, Erin, about what feeds me individually and what feeds us collectively, and then what are the systems that I'm going to put in place in order to feed us. I'm curious about, like, what are you finding? What are the tools that you're using? Cartoons included. So this is
cartoons included. Maybe I can take this one. Yeah. And I want to touch on that, but I also just wanted to mention a topic that in the UK we're quite scared of talking about, but it's hormones. And I definitely feel my hormonal journey, and yes, I had a baby last year, but actually the feeling of what is going on has heightened my hormonal journey as well. And I don't know if any other men or women are feeling that, but it just feels like I'm physiologically responding to all of the fear around us. And that's huge, because that really affects your sense of perspective. So within that sort of dynamic, Stuart, I'd say I sort of have an experience of two halves, depending on where I'm at in my hormonal cycle. And sometimes I feel beautifully and in the most amazing way, reflective. And I've gone out to my clients and I've said, you know, when my little Olivia was only 5 months old, critique my business. Tell me what I'm doing wrong. Tell me how I'm not being as inclusive as I could be. And I'm like literally lapping up, as Kerry was saying, lapping up all of this really exciting change energy. And then there are times where I'm like, everybody go away, please. Mm-hmm. And I really need to protect myself. So it's fascinating. And I think the skill that I'm learning about myself is how do I then use different tools depending on where I'm at within those waves. And I sort of learnt as a Virgo, as an active Virgo, to be okay with not doing anything, because it's a real challenge. And I think for me, just learning that in my working day, not doing anything is the most productive thing I can do, which sounds illogical, but hugely powerful.
Yeah. Rachel, you and Kerry said some things I want to really hit on, and then I want to pivot us into kind of the next piece of this, which we do have some questions from our audience. So I want to throw those out there. All of you are speaking to this idea of noticing, right? We have to notice and observe ourselves. And part of what we're observing, I'm hearing, is a kind of reclaimed awareness about our natural rhythms and our nature as human beings and what we need fundamentally. We have been trained, right? At least I'll speak for the US. We have been trained in a capitalistic, patriarchal, white supremacist society. I'm just going to throw it all out there. Okay. And so that has a lot of assumptions and narratives about the way work should go and the way we should show up to our work. Right. And I totally relate to you, Rachel. For me, it feels like an act of resistance and like reclaiming myself as a woman when I'm feeling like just my own natural cycles, and when sometimes my body needs me to rest, and then I can show up fully with energy and presence. And in the past, when I would power through, I would only be, half good. And I would be super resentful of my work, by the way, and the people I was working with, because I wasn't honoring myself. So one of the questions that I want to tie into here, and then for those that are asking questions in the Q&A, we'll make sure to follow up in our recap. We'll answer your questions in some form or fashion. But Jill has a question on what have you found to be the most effective way to convince results-focused company leadership that wellness and rest, these ideas we're floating today, is important for your teams and can make you more productive? So actually, Nathan, I'd love to hear you speak to this first, because you sit in that position of power and authority for companies, and you believe in well-being and sustainability and leadership and people. What works here?
Yeah, I mean, such an important question. And, it's something that to your point, I've believed in for a long time. I mean, this idea that we is greater than me, that, together, people are extraordinary if they, can work in their most effective way. And as a leader, the role of the leader is really to unlock the potential of the team, right? It's not about themselves being productive as a leader. It's really about this ability to help their team be the most productive. That should be the premise of what leadership is about. And I think so many organizations have hid behind kind of this idea of just management, and managers check the box. They don't have to be intuitive. They are just trying to get the work done. To be honest, 2020 has really separated the wheat from the chaff in a big way, because the organizations that I work with that are thriving, the leaders that are thriving, I had a conversation with a leader in a hospital yesterday, and we're talking about this topic of burnout. And it's what it takes is a continual sense of listening, just always on listening from the leader, to be really not just hearing things, but sensing how the team is doing and responding to it. So it's one thing to hear about it, and then it's another thing to do something about it. And it was so funny because this person that's in the hospital, she and I used to work together in a consulting firm years ago. And everything she did is the same thing that I did with our team, which was when we felt that burnout was reaching a pivotal moment, and it was reaching to a level of unproductivity, of like people were just not giving their best. They were, just kind of clocking in, clocking out. They were saying things like, I'm burned out, because I'm anxious, and all these family dynamics. And so she did what I had done around, I guess, August, September, which is like, we're all going to take a day off and you're not allowed to work. In fact, if you don't send in a picture of you doing something other than work, we're going to count it toward your vacation time. And people became extremely motivated to then do something. And it was a great opportunity to share and just be like, some people read books and some people went for hikes and some people, they created something in their craft room. And that created a dialogue that we could continue talking about, but we learned from it, we realized that we're all in this together. It's been really great, to be honest, to see other leaders throughout the country handling this in certain ways. Now, at the enterprise level, it's interesting because a lot of leaders that believe in this have to defy the organizational rules to do this. So this leader I was talking to, frankly, gave her entire team off without permission, because the enterprise was not embracing this in the same way. And it was tolerated. No one got fired because of it, but in a sense, I think organizations at the top level have a long ways to go. But the good leaders are seeing and sensing what their teams need. And honestly, now more than ever, they have to listen and respond, and then continually check in. And so that was the other piece of this one-on-one check-in. So if you would normally do this in an office environment where you'd see people in the hallways, it's not happening now. Intentionally reaching out to every single employee to set up time just to connect. It would seem like a luxury if you were trying to do that a few years ago. And now, honestly, it's a necessity for teams to be healthy and whole.
Thanks, Nathan. Yeah, I love that. And I think you're right. There's almost like an uprising that we have to kind of fight against broader systems that tend to dehumanize, right? And I absolutely love what you said about listening and sensing. And that's a very different view of leadership than many of us were trained to have, and yet I think incredibly powerful. It's a very emotionally intelligent, mature way of supporting people and teams and really seeing flourishing. I'm also curious to hear from you all. Tell me about the role, because I want to get into the sources of some of this burnout too, besides some of the global things. Like, what have you noticed, or what might you offer from your own expertise around the sources of burnout that we haven't covered yet? Like, for me, I'm noticing kind of all lack of boundary and space has been very hard on my mental health, like to not have my own space. So now, as of yesterday, I got my own space, and I can't tell you what that does for my own mental and psychic, freedom and sense of being grounded. So boundaries around my work, and not having them, not having community. Stuart and I are used to seeing each other in person regularly. It's really hard to not have that communal connection. So what are some other sources, you might say, of burnout that you're noticing, either in yourself or people around you?
I could maybe go there if you like. And just before I comment on something, I was interviewing someone last week who ritualizes the start and end of their working day, and actually when they exercise and when they have supper, by outfit changes. So they literally get dressed 5 times a day at the moment, because it's the only way they kind of feel that something's finished or started and finished. So I thought that was quite a fun idea. I was feeling sorry for the washing machine though, but that's a different story.
Probably not so good for the environment, but good for mental health. Yeah. Yeah.
The one thing that I wanted to just touch on was ways of working. I think it's a very misunderstood term. And I would kind of say, anyone on the screen, 3, 2, 1, reveal your last 2 weeks of your calendar. And would we have variety? Would we do different tasks in a different way of working? would we experiment with the way that we work based on task or the way that we feel that day? And what we've noticed in our client base is that people have become more monotonous now they're working from home. Yet actually it could have gone the opposite way. So I think we have become sort of subject to what we now call the Zoom fatigue or whatever it is. But as a result, we feel disempowered, albeit we're still designing these days ourselves. I think that's a really interesting one to think about.
Carrie, you wanted to say something.
Oh yeah, I love what Rachel said. And just to kind of co-sign on that, like, can you even just like changing your location, like going to sit outside? I know that's not, everyone can't do that, but can you go to a different room, go to the basement, go to another, just space can sometimes help to like just let your brain wake up a little bit. I love that. So, I was gonna say one that on the surface sounds obvious, but I think is important to bring up. And I think that really is our engagement with social media, not just social media, the news, like all of it, everything that we're doing on our phones. And it seems like we have to do it even more now because we're not going outside. We can't see people. So we really, really, really need to be tuned in. And I would actually challenge that and say, like, do we? How much are you doing? And how is that impacting you? Right? Like, how is it impacting you? And I know like the iPhone, they just added this screen time like function. So you can actually see, I was on my phone for 7 hours today, like looking at it. And it wasn't all Zoom meetings, people. It was email, it was Instagram, it was all of these things. And I was like, oh my gosh, I spent 7 hours. And so the point that I'm wanting to make, not just, get off social media, but like actually go and look at your behavior and see how much and see how it's making you feel. Do you need to watch the videos? Like, do you need to hear every single thing that your podcaster says? Even with the news, like I'm a person, I don't like to watch the news because there's just so much hate and fear. And I know that it's not good for my well-being, but I still get the information from other sources. So this idea that you have to be plugged in, I would challenge that and see like, what do I actually need to know? How much do I need to know? How many times do I need to go and see the same thing? And can I use that time for something else that might actually feed me versus draining me?
I love that language. And could I add just that maybe the point is to plug into yourself instead?
Beautiful, perfect.
I was going to say the one of the things for me that I'm curious for the rest of you, especially for the people of the United States, is this idea of facing systemic oppression, especially for BIPOC folks they've known about systemic oppression, have seen the effects, manage it on a day-to-day basis, but now it's in the national awareness much more. And then the constant, what do I think about this? How am I safe? How do I feel about this? What are the ways that I can navigate this? Who are the people that I have conversations with? And it's this extra layer of mental stress and navigation that we have to do. And everybody is facing this. I mean, the political climate in the United States is such that everybody's like now grappling with this. And for the people who haven't grappled with it in the past are now like, well, why do I have to? And for the people who have had are like, yes, because we have to. That's because we have to. And I just want to check in with people and see what are thoughts on that.
I had a client, Stuart, this was in the summer when a lot of the Black Lives Matter movement was again getting a lot of attention, rightly so. And, I was mentioning it and like, how are you guys dealing with this? And just tried to open up a conversation. And this person said, God, it feels so heavy. And, I said, yes, like if you don't feel heavy right now, that means, you're probably not paying attention. Like, not that I want you to feel heavy forever, to Carrie's point, like the work needs to continue always. It's just from my perspective. I want to hear from other people, but the work is heavy, but reality is heavy. And so if you, I was reminded this morning of the way that Ta-Nehisi Coates talks about the dream. Some of us have been privileged to live in a dream that America is totally just and fair and we're good to all people. And waking up to that lack of, to that, the fact that that's not true, it's really hard for a lot of us. So it's popping our bubble, and that's painful, but it needs to happen. To your point, Stuart, it has to happen. And then the thing for me is then, how do you as individuals support your own healing in that process? How do you do your work in that process? And really also, how are you in support of your teams who are on a spectrum of where they are on that journey, right? Carrie, you and I talk about this a lot. Like, there's people are in different places on that journey. What are you seeing here?
Yeah, I think the word that comes to mind is grace, and giving people grace where they are. And that can sound like impossible depending upon who, we're thinking about. I'm just thinking about the events in the Capitol. How do we give them grace? But at the same time, we're thinking about your own sphere of influence and the people that you are coming into contact with. I was on a board meeting the other week where we were actually doing a diversity, inclusion, and equity training, and it was a primarily white board, as most are. And one of the people said, I didn't understand what systemic racism was before we had this conversation. And this, he was in his 60s. I'm like, how is that possible? And then all these things start going in your head. But the idea, that's why I'm trying to come back to the idea of grace. And we are all at different points, but the point is that now we're coming to this moment together, and that we can start to take steps forward together, start to bring people into the circle, start to get the information out, share the experiences, think about what we can do. And everything that has happened before is why we're here, but we can't let it keep us in a state of anger and disillusionment and frustration too long, so that we can't move forward. All of that is totally valid. What you're feeling is valid, but how do we not get stuck in those cycles? That man, when he said it, I was just like, does that shatter what I thought about you? Or does it create a bridge for me to take where you are and move it forward? And that's not easy. And catch me in different days. I'm willing or not to do that with people. But that's the ideal, right?
That's what we're striving for. Yeah, that's a great segue. So we've touched on some solutions already, but I'm curious, what else is supporting you in that process, Carrie, and others? What supports you in feeling like you can keep showing up to your work, whatever it is, in support of service and impact and positive change for our society? What supports you individually, and how are you supporting others in that?
I quite enjoy Angela Duckworth's work around purpose. And I think, just reflecting on my own journey, towards the end of last year, I accidentally started working hard, and I suddenly realized I was spiritually or purposefully depleted. And I love everything that's just been touched on. And I think there's a connection there. I love almost applying some of the anti-racism language to anti-burnout and trying to say, how can I be more challenging towards the stuff I see as creating burnout? So from my perspective, a key solution has been to say, where can I purposefully make an impact today? And I found that when I try to take on this big agenda, it energetically depletes me. But when I make it very specific and hopefully attainable, I feel incredibly energized about that. And that for some people can be a lifelong journey of figuring out where they want to apply their purpose or their meaning. But I'm just fortunate that it happens to be in well-being something positive in itself. But I think what's going on globally, as you said, it's the overwhelm, but just finding the one thing that you feel that could be constructive has been powerful for me anyway.
Yeah, I love that. I'll absolutely riff off that. And grace is actually one of my two operative words in life. Grace and gratitude are honestly two words that are my daily mantra in terms of how I want to be. I think with everything that's going on this year and the social justice issues are just so heavy, right, Erin? Like you said, I have 2 college-age kids, and to see their reaction was just explosive. They just couldn't believe it. And opened up so much dialogue. I really think, when we're talking about, caring for our families and opening up the dialogue, or with our teams, it's really about empathy. But empathy by itself, without action, is it's still caring, but without action, it's hollow. And so I think it's this empathy and action. To your point, Rachel, it's like, what can you do? Because we can't solve the world's problems. Like, we have very little control. We've had to reconcile with that this year. But what can we do personally, through communicating, through volunteering, through fundraising, through whatever, and then taking that action, being true to yourself, following through with your heart, and actually taking action. And that's just something that is my calling for everyone. Your heart speaks to you with what you should do and how you should react and where you should go. But a lot of people just that muscle's been hardened a bit. And so they hear it, but they don't act. And, for me, it's like really wanting people to really recognize that voice, and then to go do in whatever way that their heart is leading them to do. Because I'm just this eternal optimist, and that's why I spent 20 years working in nonprofit sector. But I do believe that people that take action can do amazing things. That ordinary people can do extraordinary things, but only if we're willing to take action.
Yeah. So I love that, Nathan. I know you guys probably want to weigh in. I want to say two things, and then we have a giveaway. And then I want to do, if you can believe it, we're already ready to talk about, like, what are our solutions for next year or this year. We're here. And, one of the things I want to just speak to, Nathan, very quickly is this idea of action is vital. Completely agree with you, 1,000%. And we also need to be mindful of our renewal. So we know that we have to be renewing ourselves, I would say, on a micro moment to moment basis. This is not something, and you'll see this in Wholeness at Work a lot. This is not something a 2-week vacation can fix if you're burned out all year. We know that our energy moment to moment matters. And this noticing that we've been talking about is a muscle we all need to build with ourselves, right? So we can get really in tune with our own spiritual, energetic, emotional, mental, and physical health needs, right? And then design our work and life around that. So I wanted to say that. So real quick, Amber, if you wouldn't mind hopping on, we have 2 giveaways for our attendees. One is the Wholeness at Work workbook. And let's start there. So our team in the background has a list of all of your names, and we're going to now announce a winner. Amber, can you hop on video?
Yes. Awesome. Okay. Fantastic. All right. We have the wonderful Alicia Keyser-Lewis. She's going to win this wonderful Wholeness at Work book.
Yay. Congratulations.
And we will connect with you right after. So don't worry. We'll get this to you. And then the next giveaway that we have is the Maslach Burnout Inventory. And the winner for that is Jen Bauer. So
go Jen.
Okay.
Congratulations.
And also, we want everyone to have an opportunity to buy this book if you're interested. And just as an exclusive discount, we have 5% off. Use the launch event discount code, and we're going to include the purchase link in the chat. So quick, easy checkout, put in your code, and this is our gift to you.
Fabulous. Congratulations, Jen and Alicia. Awesome. Thank you, Amber. Okay, so panel, I know we could talk about all of these things for, weeks, and hopefully this is just the first of many conversations that we have. One of the things we're going to be doing is asking our participants what else they want to hear along these topics. We're raising some really big issues. The one thing I want to leave with today is, like, what is your big focus on for well-being and wholeness into the year? And then I'd like to have each of us just answer quickly, and then we'll save some space for Q&A. We do have a couple of questions I'd love to get to. I'll start. Like, for me, this idea about values, being very clear about my personal values, being willing to put them in action, not just saying I care about justice, but actually acting on behalf of it. And then also creating boundaries in support of my values, right? If I value wholeness, how do I kind of build my schedule and time and space and supportive things that I value? How do I make sure my family gets the presence that they need, et cetera? So there's a lot to that, but that's my big theme this year, is kind of values-based boundaries. What about from you guys?
I can go next. I think for me, the number one thing that I'm going to be working on in 2021 is honesty, and really honesty around what I need. And so asking myself that question on a constant basis, and then being honest about what that is. If I need a nap, if I need a day off, if I need to work until 10 because I'm on a roll, if I need space for my partner, if I need time with my partner. But that constant questioning, so that I can stay more in tune with myself and be more aware when those symptoms of burnout start to show up for me.
Brilliant. I love that. Thanks, Carrie.
I can go next. I love the philosophy around resilience, so bouncing back. And I used to think it was about being able to stay on track. And now I've learned to delight in falling over. So I really enjoy learning from lying on the ground. And I actually maybe at times even welcome it. That's where the real resilience, well-being, wholeness stuff happens.
I love that. Yeah, falling down in quotes, right? Where is resting actually exactly what's needed?
You know, mine, Erin, is probably similar to yours. It's really, you know, being true to your heart and following through, is being more intuitive, really stretching that muscle, and following through. And my, you know, kind of internal theme for the year is really think till it hurts. I'm someone that really believes in the power of gratitude, the scalability of gratitude, you know, that it passes from one person to another person. And I think now more than ever, you know, those that are inclined that way have to do even more than they're comfortable with. You know, if you're going to write a couple thank you cards, write a couple more, and pay for the person behind you in the drive-through, or whatever it might be in your daily walk, but spread that gratitude until honestly, until it hurts. Like, it's the only way I can put it. It's just like, it's something that our world needs so badly. And I know it's infectious, and I know I'm always the one that ends up being more blessed because of it. So
beautiful. Thanks, Nathan.
Yeah, I'll add, for me, the thing that has been powerful is knowing that there's lots of tools out there, that there isn't just one way to heal or to be supported, and that especially for us, as you know, for BIPOC folks, there's a cornucopia of things that we can choose from, and be willing to try all those different things until it really like resonates for you, and you're like, oh, this is my thing, and I can use that thing going forward, or this is my thing for now, and I can use something else going forward. But there's a lot out there for you to use in order to like really be resilient, and to have gratitude, and to be whole.
Stuart, you're reminding me of a theme that often runs through my head, and it says, let yourself be supported. As someone who thinks that I need to be tough all the time and like be the strong working mom, like actually allowing people to support me is a huge stretch, and is exactly what helps me feel whole. And I want to just feed that in. We have a couple of questions that are related to this from our audience, if you don't mind. Tracy's asked, when you're realizing you're experiencing burnout, what are the first few steps to take? And I would say there's at least 3, but as Stuart mentioned, there's a cornucopia. I would say the first is to practice mindfulness, this noticing, this awareness and observation of yourself, to even understand what is occurring for you. What do you need in this moment? And starting to get tuned into yourself and your own needs and the present moment, right? The second is physical and emotional self-care, mental self-care. Mental health care is healthcare, and it's okay to need it. In fact, I say this a lot. Everybody should have a therapist. I want to normalize therapy. It is vital. We all get supported in our mental health. just as we do in our physical health. And that healing is a very important piece of it. The third is, we've also mentioned it today, which is around finding ways to experience hope and compassion. Hope and compassion, there's so much research around them as positive emotions and what they do for our neurobiology. So, and this isn't pretend hope. This is, someone said it yesterday. They're like, I'm not quite ready to hope, but I have hope that I could feel hopeful. That is enough to trigger that process, that hormonal process, as Rachel mentioned, in our bodies, to let ourselves know that we don't have to survive this moment, right? There is an opportunity to let our guard down and really do something at a higher level. So those are the first three things I would say. In Wholeness at Work, this self-guided coaching program, part of building that mindfulness is getting in touch with exactly what you're feeling and experiencing now, and what are the root sources of it. So we can't really solve what's occurring for you as individual leaders until you get into what's occurring, and it's not at a surface level. So this coaching program that I'm hoping you guys all take advantage of today is designed to get you into that deep dive. Okay. So we have 1 minute left, and we've got a few other questions. I promise we will send you responses as a whole group to those questions in our follow-up email. Would love to hear a final word from anybody on the panel. What do you guys want to leave the group with?
Well, I'll start by just being grateful for this opportunity to engage in this dialogue, and for people that want to listen and learn more, and really understand their either personal role as an individual or role as a leader, because that's where real change starts.
Beautiful. Thank you, Nathan.
I really love that, Nathan. For me, this has been wonderful. Erin, thank you so much for creating this space for us to talk about this. I would love for people to question like the structures that are around them. Like there was a really great question in here about, the schedule and the time and all the things I have to do. Like, how do I incorporate wholeness? Well, what if we push back on the demands from the outside? Because there's so many things we do that we don't actually have to do or need to do, but we just do them because we're in the habit. It feels like, it's the busy work. It's the stuff we know doesn't help us get to our goal, but we do it anyways. And it could be because someone's making us. We feel like they're making us, but how do we push back on those systems and say, you know what? I have 15 things on this list. 2 of these are critical to the goal that you set in front of me. So let's talk about that. Right. And we're also culprits, right? When you make your to-do list, how many things do you put on there? Like, seriously. So pushing back on yourself as the boss of your time too. I made a list of 15 things. I only really need to do the laundry today. That's it. And just
show up here.
Do the experiment and see what happens.
Brilliant. Thank you. I want to give us all space, but we are over time. So I'm afraid that I would like to honor our panelists and attendees and let everybody go. So thank you to everyone for showing up, for being here, for engaging in this really awesome and encouraging, rich discussion about wholeness at work and burnout, and more to come, lots more. Thank you, everybody. Take good care.